So I am super excited to chat with today's guest. We have Mira Dessy, and we are going to be talking all about ingredients, and which isn't a surprise because Mira is known as the ingredient guru, and she is the author of the Pantry Principle, how to read the label and understand what's really in your food. So Mira believes it's not just what you eat, but what's in what you eat. And Mira teaches clients how to navigate the grocery store's mammoth packaged food stock, to decipher confusing food labels, and to find real food solutions for chronic health issues. And thank you so much for joining us, Mira.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Yeah, same here. Definitely excited to talk about all the different ingredients. And why don't we start off just with a little bit of your background? How did you become known as the ingredient guru?
That's a really good question. It's actually a very long journey, but I'll tell you the short version, which is I used to be in a completely different field. I was a database administrator for an international research firm. And over a period of time, I just got sicker and sicker, wound up having a lot of health challenges going on. Ultimately, I was diagnosed with 5 different autoimmune disorders. And during that time, I, of course, amassed a collection of doctors and prescriptions. It's funny now, but wasn't funny then. My joke was, if there was an IST, I had it: endocrinologist, gastroenterologist, cardiologist, like I had them all. And as I was trying to work with these doctors to figure out what was going on, I realized nobody was talking about food. Like there were a few minor suggestions, but really nothing intensive. And then a friend of mine gave me a book about artificial colors that rocked my world, because I was like, holy cow. I had no idea this could make that much of a difference. And I will share that at the time, I thought we were eating very healthy. You know, I cook, I make all of our food, but we still had processed things in the house. We belonged to a CSA. We did all the things, but there was still a lot of junk. And as I began to go through my pantry, just looking at artificial colors, I was blown away by how much was there. And then I began to do more research and discover more problems with things. Eventually, I wound up going back to school, became certified as a nutrition educator, and then from there began to work on not only improving my own health, but as people saw me getting better where I lived, they were like, hey, can you help me? And so that sort of began the process of my practice, which led to the book, because I kept saying the same thing to people all the time. And then from there, everybody kept saying, man, you know so much about the label, you know so much about this. And one day, one friend said to me, you know, you really are the ingredient guru. And I was like, ooh, I like that. And that's how I got to where I am. So it was not an overnight thing. It was a very long journey.
All right. Yeah, that definitely is a very catchy name. And so ingredients, it sounds like it's played a really big role in helping you with your 5 different autoimmune conditions that you were diagnosed with.
Absolutely. So my primary was ulcerative colitis. And, you know, for anybody who has or knows someone with ulcerative colitis, it's a very challenging disorder. It impacts your body's ability to absorb nutrients, so you can be nutritionally very deficient. You have to know where a bathroom is at all times, regardless of where you are. Your gut is overwhelmed, you're exhausted, you're worn out. Like your body is just so depleted, because the gut really is the core of our health and well-being. And I am happy to say that all these years later, you know, I get regular colonoscopies because it's prudent to do so. My last colonoscopy, I was told that I have no signs of ulcerative colitis in my system at this point. So I like to share that, because I want people to know it's never too late to change your diet and your lifestyle. I was in my 40s when I was diagnosed with autoimmune health issues. And so I made changes, and here we are. Things are definitely much better. And then the other thing that I really want to encourage people to know is that there's also not one path to that. You have to find what's the right fit for your bio-individual body. I just happen to believe that ingredients are a foundation for anyone, regardless of what your health condition is or what your body requirements are.
So when it comes to the different, I don't know if you want to say harmful ingredients, controversial ingredients. I mean, some of them are controversial, some of them are
Yeah.
proven to be harmful. But how does the United States compare to other countries? Because I know that some countries are more strict when it comes to their standards regarding ingredients.
Yeah, so there's one way that we are better than a lot of other countries, and that is that we do clearly identify it on the label. Many other countries use something called an E number, so it's an E followed by 3 digits, and you have to know which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones. That makes it really hard. Ours flat out say, blue number 2, or polysorbate 80 or something. Like ours are very clearly identified. So it does make it easier to read the label once we develop the habit of doing that. When it comes to what's in what we eat, we are not great. And one of the things that is most frustrating to me is how, there is a global food net, because big food is really 10 major companies, maybe 7 at this point, because there have been some mergers, and they make food for us and they make food for other countries. And what they make here, they make differently overseas, because they know the legislative requirements are different. And they either are going to have to put a warning on it because it's harmful, or they're not allowed to use it at all. So they don't. And it frustrates me to no end that they're willing to do it where they have to, but not because it's the right thing to do.
And then when it comes to the food labels, I wanted to talk more about this. Obviously, that's what you do. You help people understand a food label, but I mean, how, I guess, reliable are food labels? Do they intentionally try to be sneaky where, they're hiding the ingredients, and do they have to reveal everything that is actually on the food label?
That is such a great question. So the answer is it depends in terms of, can you believe the food label? And I will say there are some things that they're allowed to do where they're not necessarily lying about it, but they're given a pass. For example, if something has less than 0.5% of trans fats or sugars, they're allowed to say that there's 0. And that is less than 0.5 grams per serving, the serving being determined by the manufacturer. So it makes sense that sometimes they might go, oh, a serving is 2 cookies. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say not many people look at the package and go, oh, I should only have 2 cookies. The other thing that happens, they are masters at using something called front of package labeling. And this is where they put all the buzzwords and all the things that they know are attractive to the consumer on the front of the package, because they want to try to convince you not to flip that package around and look at the label. So they may say made with organic blue corn, but then you look at the other ingredients and they're not great. Or a full day's vitamin C, and then you look at the other ingredients, again, not great. So they want to put whatever they think will be most attractive to you. And these days, a lot of it are finding ways to get the word organic in there, even if they have just one organic ingredient. So you'll notice it won't say organic corn chips. It will say made with organic blue corn. That's because they don't have enough process in there, enough of the organic process to claim that the whole thing is organic. The other thing that is really challenging about the label is that you have to do, so it's broken down into 2 parts. The top part is the nutrition panel. The bottom part is the ingredient panel. In the nutrition panel, it's based on 2,000 calories a day. Not everybody needs 2,000 calories. And I know very few people who do the math. So if you're looking at something and perhaps you only need 1,800 calories a day, you're not going to sit there and recalculate everything. And if you eat more than a serving size, you're not going to recalculate everything. So it gets very confusing and overwhelming to know exactly how much you're getting. And then the other thing about them not disclosing, there are a couple of ways around disclosing certain negative ingredients. for example, they can say less than 2% of, and they don't have to tell you how much is in there. They hide under terms like natural or flavor. And then the other thing that is a little bit challenging is I am seeing more and more instances of certain foods where they're putting certain ingredients like BPA in cereal. They're no longer putting it in the cereal, they're putting it in the package, because then they don't have to put it in the ingredient list. But if it's touching the food, it gets into the food.
Wait, so BPA, so say that again. So BPA
Sorry.
could be in the packaging, but not in the food.
Sorry, BPA can be part of the packing. It's in the can liners and everything else. So if you have canned goods, if the lining is BPA, they don't have to tell you that there's BPA in there.
Okay.
Because it's part of the can. And
Yeah,
then in cereal, they have BHT and BHA. Sometimes they'll put those in, they'll embed it into the plastic package. And those boxes usually are plastic. So that is a form of bisphenol, whether it's BPA. And, they may say, oh, BPA free, and everybody gets all excited about that. The challenge is there's all kinds of bisphenols. There's, BPS, BPF, there's all different kinds. So if it's plastic, chances are it is a bisphenol, and those are hormone disruptors, endocrine disruptors, not good for us. And if they're touching the food, they can get into the food.
Yeah, good points. And going back to what you said about organic, where it could have a food could have a single ingredients that's organic, and then they'll say, includes organic corn. Another word is natural. So a lot of labels say natural, which doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Natural is not equivalent, so definitely not equivalent to organic. But do you want to talk a little bit about natural products?
I love that. Yes.
Natural
So
flavors.
yeah, natural means almost absolutely nothing. When it comes to animal products, natural does have a small legislative oversight that says they are not allowed to use added hormones, antibiotics, that kind of thing. However, my joke is they could, if they thought it would sell more, they'd put natural on shoe polish. It means nothing. They can take a conventional product, put the word natural on it, and often they do, because then consumers think, oh, it's less than organic, but better than conventional, so I'm going to buy that. But really, they're buying the same thing at a slightly higher price. And I love that you brought up natural flavor, because it brings up one of my least favorite ingredients, which is natural flavor can be anything. There is one in particular called castoreum, which you will never ever see on a label, unless apparently you're buying some weird liquor over in Scandinavia somewhere, because they proudly announce that it's castoreum liqueur. It is made from the anal gland secretion of beavers.
Wow.
And yeah, and so here's the thing. I did once at a conference, I was sharing about this, and someone raised their hand and they're like, is it bad for you? And the answer was, apparently it turns out, no, it's not harmful for you. And there are homeopathic remedies that do use castoreum, which is fine. My objection is that they are trying to hide it. So they hide it under either natural flavor or natural vanilla flavor. Now, I will say there is not a vast amount of castoreum in the food supply at this point, because we no longer harvest beavers for the fur trade, or I don't think we harvest as many as we used to. And I believe they no longer put it in cigarettes, although you should still stop smoking. But I object to the fact that they're trying to hide it. They're not telling you what's in there. It's like when they're using colors, they may say natural color, and they may not tell you that it's coming from bugs. For example, carnitine comes from, not carnitine, sorry, carnitine is amino acid. Cochineal comes from bugs, but they try to use those words to disguise what they're doing, because they know that consumers would be upset about it.
It does.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, as far as ingredients derived from bugs, does also, I think, confectioner's sugar? Is that also I've heard? Or
Yeah, so not confectioner's sugar, but shellac. So confectioner's glaze. So for example, the shiny coating on candies, jelly beans, and that kind of thing is often made from shellacs, and that come from the lac bug. And the story I was going to share is at one point, Starbucks had a drink, strawberry frappuccino that comes in a bottle, and they used to make it with plant-based colors, and they switched to carmine or cochineal, which comes from the bugs. And this being the age of the internet, somebody found out and twigged, and the world was up in arms. One, because vegans don't eat bugs. There are some people who, for religious reasons, don't eat bugs. And so they were really upset that they didn't know that it was a bug ingredient. And there was such a hue and a cry that Starbucks gave up and went back to plants. So, and again, I'm not saying that bugs are bad for you. I'm just saying I want to know what's in my food. If you choose to eat bugs, and many cultures do, that's a huge thing. That's totally fine. I just want to know what's in my food, and that is why you have to read the label.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think now there's like powders, protein powders made of crickets, and but as long as the person knows that that's what they're adding to the smoothie or however they're consuming it, but it's another thing when the person doesn't know that they're eating bugs. So I definitely agree. And so let's talk more about different ingredients, some of the more common ingredients to be concerned about. And I know I asked you also if you could tie at least some of them into autoimmunity, since a
Sure.
large part of the listener base have either Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, and I'm sure some have, as you know, if you have one autoimmune condition, you're more likely to have more than one, like, you know, your history. So I'm sure some will have other autoimmune conditions in addition to an autoimmune thyroid condition.
Sure. And, you know, when for the ones that are highly tied to autoimmunity, we'll come back to that in a minute. I will say, in general, I think most people are aware at this point that anything artificial should be avoided. Artificial flavors, colors, sweeteners, those are all really harmful to the body. Whether you have an autoimmune disorder or not, they're just straight up not good for us. I think one of the other things that a lot of people are not aware of is plant gums and carrageenan, which is often sort of included in that category. And the reason I encourage people to just be mindful of those is because of the impact that they can have on the gut. So carrageenan is not a good choice, comes from a seaweed, and it can be very disruptive to gut function, overwhelming, and has been linked to causing ulcerative colitis-like symptoms. So definitely we don't want carrageenan. Unfortunately, it appears in almost every aisle of the grocery store. So you really do have to read the label to watch out for that. Plant gums are not necessarily harmful. They're often used as thickeners or emulsifiers. And I appreciate that food producers are trying to find plant-based alternatives for that. The challenge comes in when you look at how much are you getting? Because if, you know, there's no number that says, oh, it's this many parts per million or this much of these plant gums. But if you're buying, you know, alternative dairy and other products that are thickened with plant gums, maybe a soup or something else, all of a sudden you start to get a lot of it. Frozen confections have it as well. So it's just a matter of being aware of what's on the label. And if you are someone who is struggling with some gut health issues, or maybe you notice every now and then out of the blue, you start having tummy troubles, you may want to look at what you're eating and read those packages to see if there's a common thread. And I find, so my practice tends to focus primarily on gut health. And for most of my clients, we find that there's a lot of correlation between the food gums.
And when you say,
I'm sorry,
Mira. So for those who need a little bit more clarification, you're talking about like xanthan gum, guar gum, like
yes, xanthan gum, guar gum, locust bean gum, all of those.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to, some might
Yeah,
have
no,
plant
absolutely.
gums and not sure what that means. So
Sure, absolutely. And then the other one that I think people need to, again, read the label for, to be mindful of, is sugar, only because it appears in so many things, and food producers have realized that people are starting to read the label a little bit more, which is great. I'm really happy to see that. And people have also learned that on the ingredient panel, products are listed in order of volume. So the more of something there is, the higher up on the list it is. And in order to make sure that sugar is not the number one ingredient, they start putting lots of different kinds of sugar in there. So they may have rice bran syrup, maltodextrin, sugar, agave nectar, all different kinds of things. So you really just want to read the label and try to keep your sugar intake as low as you can, because too much sugar does overwhelm the gut. And of course, sugar, salt, unhealthy fats, gluten, all of those are highly correlated with autoimmune health challenges. And then if we can talk about some of the less common things that people need to watch out for, before we dive into that, I would like to point out, because anybody listening at this point has probably got a page full of notes and they're going, oh my God, where do I do this? Like, this is really overwhelming. This is not a one and done process. This is my goal today, hopefully, is to share with you about some ingredients that are not a great choice for health, much less autoimmune health, and to help people recognize those so that one at a time you can begin to knock those out of your diet. And so when you look at the list at the end of this call and you see some of these things and you start reading labels, you're like, okay, I can look at lowering how much guar gum I have in my diet. I can look at knocking out food colors. I can look at reducing sugars, or I can look at some of these other ingredients that I'm about to talk about, but just one at a time. Just approach one thing at a time, because everything you're doing now is one thing more than you were doing yesterday. And over time, it will all add up to be a really big impact.
Before you go over those ingredients, getting back to sugar, can I ask you, what are your thoughts on some of the more natural alternatives like stevia or monk fruits? There's also allulose. What are your thoughts when it comes to those?
So sugar is actually a huge category. We could talk for a whole hour about that. But in a nutshell, I will say the sugars that I definitely want people not to include in their diet. Hopefully at this point, everybody knows high fructose corn syrup is really bad for you. The other one is agave nectar. Not a great choice. It is a diabetes friendly type sweetener because it is low glycemic. The challenge is high fructose corn syrup is only 55% fructose by volume, and it's bad for your liver, bad for our system. Agave nectar, the way it's processed in our culture, is 70% fructose by volume. So it's even more fructose, which is more challenging for your liver. The non-caloric sweeteners like monk fruit or stevia, I know a lot of people like them because, man, we love sugar. We are programmed to seek it out, and we want to have our cake and not have the calories. There are studies that show that they can be a better option than artificial sweeteners. However, some people are very sensitive to them, and excessive consumption can impact the gut microbiome. So you still want to have, if you're going to enjoy stevia or monk fruit, you still want to have those in moderation. And when it comes to allulose, I will share, I am not a fan. Part of the challenge with allulose, it is naturally occurring. It shows up in things like dates and raisins and wheat and that sort of thing, but it shows up in very minute amounts. And we've now gotten to a point where we have learned how to process it so that we can get a lot of it. And again, many of my gut health clients find that allulose does not agree with their system, and they wind up having bloating or diarrhea or other health issues. And so I'm just not a fan.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, if you could now move on to those other ingredients, because I know you're ready to dive into some of those ingredients.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I think one of the things that we, when we start reading the label, a lot of times, if you read the ingredient label, which I really hope people do, and if you don't, I would love to encourage you to start. there are things on there that we don't know what they are. And for some reason, our human habit is to just skip over it, to go to the things we know and ignore the things that we don't know. When it comes to autoimmune health, there are a couple of ingredients that are really challenging. So we definitely want to make sure that we're avoiding those. And they're nanoparticles, which means they're very, very small. And studies have shown that they can have a major impact on the body as a whole, but they also can very heavily impact our immune system. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding them. And they are titanium dioxide. It's a whitening agent. So it appears in a lot of things, gums and baked goods and other things. It also appears in toothpaste. And, one of the challenges, it's kind of weird how they use titanium dioxide as a whitener, because we somehow have been conditioned to believe that things need to be, bright white, and titanium dioxide does that for us, but it's not a good choice for us. So we really shouldn't be eating it. Another one is silicone dioxide, and that's an anti-caking agent. So they use that so things don't get clumpy and stick together. It's for the manufacturing process. And so we really want to, again, read the label and avoid that. And then the third sort of non-traditional ingredient that I really encourage people to avoid is, the name is so long that they abbreviated on the label. So the name is tert-butyl hydroquinone, and on the label, you will see it as TBHQ, all capital letters. And it's a preservative. But again, there are studies showing that it has a really huge impact and maybe negatively impacting our immune health. And it appears in so many products. And, this is a really great point to share, that the FDA does require immunotoxicity testing. When things come to market, they test them to see if they have an immunological response. The biggest challenge is so many of the ingredients that we look at today, and I include titanium dioxide, silicone dioxide, and TBHQ in this category, they were approved decades ago. And nobody ever really goes back and redoes that FDA approval process. It's very rare. It was a major win when the FDA decided that trans fats were no longer generally recognized as safe, because normally once something's approved, man, it just rides forever. So, this is where, as a consumer, you really need to be proactive about the choices that you're making.
Yeah, it's really scary when you think about the ingredients that many of these foods have, and appreciate you sharing some of them that, again, like titanium dioxide, it's also not in foods, but a number of supplement companies will also include titanium dioxide. So we got to look into other ingredients. And as you mentioned, toothpaste. So it's, so again, yeah, just thank you for sharing that. And then, so gluten, a lot of people are familiar with gluten as being harmful when it comes to the gut, and just really just a number of reasons why not just people with autoimmunity, but just people with non-autoimmune conditions should also avoid gluten. But one question someone asked me recently, hidden sources of gluten. So I know there are hidden sources of corn, like maltodextrin and ascorbic acid, and there's others. But are there any hidden sources of gluten, or is it pretty obvious? Like, obviously, if it has wheat, we know it has gluten. If it has barley, rye, we know it has gluten. Oats are commonly cross-contaminated with gluten. But are there any, I guess you could say, hidden ingredients where it might indicate that there's gluten in a certain food, but the person might not know it unless if they're really familiar with the label?
Yeah, the biggest way that gluten can be hidden in food, especially if it's from a non-wheat source. Like you said, wheat is one of the top 9 allergens. So if there is any wheat in a product, they have to disclose it. Or if it's run on equipment that also runs wheat, they have to disclose that. For the other top gluten containing grains, if they use the word starch, that means it can come from anything, and often it does tend to come from gluten, unless they're saying a specific source. So if they say tapioca starch, that's different. They could say modified food starch, for example, that can come from just about anything. And so that really is the key word that you want to watch out for. And I will share that at first it's a little, you've got all this information, you're trying to watch out for all of these ingredients. And like I said, one at a time, please don't overwhelm yourself. And nobody wants you to spend 10 hours at the grocery store trying to shop, So if you find, let's say there's a food that your family likes and it has modified food starch in it, usually they tend to have things grouped together by type. So I encourage you to take the time and look through some of the others and see if you can find something that doesn't have that ingredient in it, so that you can then begin to make that transition one product at a time to those things that are going to represent a better choice for you and your family.
And then, so when it comes to organic, now, if you're buying organic produce, I assume that's like you're pretty safe if you're buying organic whole foods. But once anything is packaged, so if you're buying organic cookies, for example, let's say gluten-free organic cookies, is it safe to say that there still are potentially less than desirable ingredients? Maybe not the artificial colorings or flavors, but I guess what are your thoughts about just packaged foods that give the perception of being healthier, whether it's cookies or cereals? But again, and I'm not, I guess going back to what you said earlier, I mean, it might not be 100% organic, but even if it is organic, like certified organic, I mean, is it safe? It's probably safer than other foods, like just getting like Chips Ahoy or Nabisco or whatever is out there. But when it comes to, again, organic cookies, organic cakes, organic, and again, we're talking about certified organic cereals, are there still ingredients that people should be concerned about?
So great question. And I will say that certified organic means that it is typically, depending on what it is, they can be 90% organic and say made with organic ingredients, or it can be 100% organic. And then they have like the full certification and they can put the stamp on and everything. And I will lead with, I love cookies. So this is not a bash against cookies. A 100% organic gluten-free cookie is a treat, and I love them. I think one of the challenges is we have to remember that it's still a treat. It doesn't matter if it's gluten-free. It doesn't matter if it's organic. It's still going to be sugar and a processed food. And so to just be mindful of that. The example that I like to use is years ago, this was during the whole Atkins phase. No, it was South Beach, I think it was, where they came up with these Snackwell cookies, and they were fat-free cookies. And people were like, oh, fat-free cookies. I can eat all the cookies I want, and they eat a whole sleeve of cookies. It's still a whole sleeve of cookies. It doesn't matter what it says on the label. So if you happen to find an organic, 100% organic, clean ingredient, gluten-free, delicious cookie that you love, I invite you to enjoy it, savor it, and just remember it's still a treat.
I agree. And I'm a cookie person too. Not that I eat cookies all the time, but I love a good organic gluten-free cookie. So I wanted to talk to you about, again, we chatted about this a little bit before I press record, but Trader Joe's. And we're going to talk about not just Trader Joe's, but some other grocery stores. Like Whole Foods is not perfect. I mean, there's no perfect place, but I guess one thing that's irked me with Trader Joe's, and again, I don't do all my shopping at Trader Joe's, but with the GMOs, they claim on their website that they don't use genetically modified organisms in their products, yet they won't label their products as non-GMO. So we're just pretty much taking their word for it. So can you, so what are your thoughts on something like this? Because again, it shouldn't annoy me, because again, I just won't buy what I'm not sure is not genetically modified, but still it would be nice. I mean, anyway, so I'll be quiet, let you kind of talk more about this.
Sure. And, I will share that I do shop at Trader Joe's. However, there's a limited amount of things that I buy, and I try to be as careful as I can about it. Trader Joe's, their big thing is that they have everything, almost everything in that store is Trader Joe's brand, which means that they are private labeling other companies' products. So they're not manufacturing them themselves. They're taking somebody else going, we like this product. We want you to package it for us. And that's very common. Grocery stores do it all the time. There's, what is it? At Walmart, it's Great Value. At Whole Foods, it's 365. So there's whatever the private label is, the grocery store is not manufacturing that. They're just private labeling it so that they can sell it for a little bit less money because it's their in-house brand. Many of the products that Trader Joe's sells may have that GMO, non-GMO verified, project verified label on it. But when Trader Joe's, my understanding is when they private label, they're not allowed to also use that non-GMO project verified label. So they would have to pay for their own labeling. And I don't think they want to do that because that costs money. And then those costs would get passed on to the consumer. So they would rather sell for less. I know they say that they verify their own products and that they do all of the due diligence to make sure that there are no genetically modified ingredients. However, I have seen more than once where people have asked for the documentation. These are like, investigative journalists or other places have asked Trader Joe's to share their documentation, and they say, nope, that's proprietary private information. We don't share. And so I really don't know what to think about that, because I would think that if they were doing their due diligence and they could verify that everything was non-GMO in there, that they would be happy to share that, because that's what consumers are looking for these days. So I think it's a little bit misleading on their part to say, we've done our due diligence and we're satisfied with the level of what's in there, but we're not going to tell you. And so again, you have to be careful about what you purchase there and make the right choices for you. I will share there, and I don't remember off the top of my head while we're talking, but there are certain products where I am pretty sure I know who the original manufacturer is, and I know they're non-GMO, and so I'm comfortable buying it. If I don't know, I don't buy it.
Yeah. And again, the goal wasn't to pick on Trader Joe's. Like you, I do some of my shopping at Trader Joe's. It's just what they say one thing on their website, yet, as you said, they're not willing to disclose anything. And I guess that's a good reason as far as, well, maybe not the documentation, but again, if they're private labeling and they're not allowed to at least put on the products that it's GMO free, I guess I could understand that.
And I love that you pointed out no grocery store is perfect. Like I shop at a number of different grocery stores because, I, like everybody else, I have to buy groceries. And so no one grocery store is going to have everything you need. For a long time, Whole Foods had like this halo of, perfect ingredients, and not everything in there is perfect either. They may have more than average, but they still are going to have some things that are not a great choice. And again, this is where learning how to read the label and how to make choices that represent what you want to consume for yourself and your family, that gives you you vote with your wallet. That gives you the ultimate control.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Whole Foods, I do a good amount of my shopping there, but you're right. There's plenty of products that have unhealthy oils. There's plenty of products that are not gluten-free. So yeah, wherever you go, you need to be an expert in reading ingredients, which is where you come into play, and where your book comes into play, and your website. So yeah, I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. And is there anything else that you want to talk about? I mean, I guess one thing which leads us to, I guess, your website and your book. Obviously, one question is, how can people become better educated when it comes to reading labels? What action can they take other than just listening to this conversation? And again, what resources do you have other than your book?
Sure. So obviously I love my book and I really encourage people to have it. It's a great resource because it teaches you how to read the label. It's got 7 simple rules for healthy grocery shopping. And then we break down different sections of the grocery store to help you learn. Because again, this is not meant to be a all at once process. I didn't get here overnight, and I don't expect anybody listening to this to do that either. But if you make a few changes, as you go along, 6 months down the road, you're going to look back and go, wow, look at how far we've come. And if you're somebody who's already making changes, then this can maybe help you take it to the next level and go even deeper into that. So the book is great because that's available on Amazon. It's easy to get, that kind of thing. I do also have a newsletter called Food News You Can Use. And every Tuesday, my newsletter comes out and shares more stupid stuff that they do to our food. I shouldn't say that. It's mostly letting you know what's coming, what food producers are doing, or what to watch out for. But I do also, when somebody has a good move, they've made a change that I approve, I do share good news as well. So it's basically just helping people understand the state of food. And so to get the easiest way to get the newsletter is to go to theingredientguru.com, and it's right there on the front page. You can sign up for that.
Okay. So what would a good starting point be? Maybe like to purchase your book and then also sign up for your newsletter?
For the newsletter. Yep. That is a great starting point. And I think one of the other things that I really want to encourage families to do, and this comes out of my own personal experience, it is really important that you not make these decisions in isolation. So if you're going to make changes for your family in terms of what they're eating, help them understand why we're making these changes and get their buy-in. Because with my family, I was like, right, this is what we're doing. And there were a lot of arguments, and I could have saved myself so much headache if I had simply said, hey, like, here are 3 other options. Let's try all of these and see which one we like better. Or this is why we're making this choice, and at the very beginning, I didn't know. And truthfully, I was fighting for my life. I was so ill. I was living my life on the sofa. I couldn't function. And so it was martial law in the kitchen in my house. But that is not the way that it needs to be. And I really don't want anybody else to have to go through that, because if you can get buy-in from your family, then everybody is going to be healthier. And not only that, your kids are going to grow up to be healthier adults and raise a healthier next generation, because they're going to know to avoid all of these things that are non-nutritive negative ingredients.
And what I'm glad you mentioned that. Thanks, Mira. I want to expand on that as far as, when someone's healing, I definitely recommend for them to be super strict. But like when someone is in your situation or my situation in a state of wellness, like, is it safe to say that occasional exposure to some of these ingredients, I guess it depends on the ingredients, but let's say canola oil, things like that, like I guess, what do you follow on a, not daily, because I'm sure on a daily basis, you're pretty good, but do you indulge every now and then? Do you follow like an 80-20 rule or a 90-20, a 90-10 rule? If you go to, a party or a wedding, do you ever stray, or do you bring your own food? When you go on vacation, are you always eating in and not, going to a restaurant? I mean, so I guess the question is, how can people deviate, especially with those with autoimmune conditions, once they've restored their health? And if so, what guidelines do you typically recommend, or what do you follow?
Sure. No, that is such a great question. And I work with my clients on this a lot. I believe the home should be as clean as possible, because you're the one who's in ultimate control over that. And so we try really hard not to have anything that is not within our guidelines. When we do go out to eat, we do go over to friends' houses or to family gatherings or those kinds of things. And when I'm in those situations, I don't sit there and pick apart, oh, was this made with whatever? Like, nobody wants that. So I just recognize that the food is made with love, and I am consuming it from a healthy standpoint. There are certain things that I will not do. So I still don't eat gluten. I still look out for certain ingredients. Like if I'm at a party and someone's got M&Ms, I'm not going to eat them. It's artificial color. Like if it's clearly identified as one of the ingredients that I definitely know I don't want, I will avoid that. And I feel like that's a pretty reasonable way to live in the everyday world, where your home is your castle and is as close to, complete in terms of ingredient, what's the word that I'm looking for? Sovereignty, as you can get. And then outside the home, what are your guidelines to make? Because I know, for example, some people can't do dairy. Well, if you can't do dairy, then why are you going to do that just because you're away from home? You're still going to watch out for it, so just being mindful.
All right, wonderful. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about, or anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
I just really want to encourage people, start where you are. Start here, start with one thing, whether it's avoiding some of the things that the nanoparticles that we talked about, or avoiding the artificials, or watching out for how much sugar is here, because food producers hide sugar in everything. But just pick that one thing and you'll be on your way to making healthy choices. And it is totally achievable. It's not a mystery. It just takes, focus and practice. It's not about perfection. It's about progress, though. So practice helps progress.
Couldn't agree more. Definitely check out Mira's book, The Pantry Principle. And can you let them know your website again?
Yes, absolutely. So my website is theingredientguru.com.
And you have, besides your newsletter, you have also an option to sign up for, you have other options too?
I do. So I also have a new membership, which is really wonderful. We call it the Kitchen Table. And as part of the Kitchen Table, you get access to all of my programs. So I have a Preparedness Pantry Masterclass, a 21-day nutrition reset. I've also got a whole bunch of ebooks that are in there, that all of my library, and there's more coming. And then we also have 3 live calls a month that people can connect and learn more and build a community together.
All right, wonderful. Of course, I'll make sure to include the link to your website in the show notes, as well as to your book too. Of course, they could just visit Amazon for that. But thanks, Mira. This was a wonderful conversation on the different ingredients, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure the listeners did as well.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was really lovely to chat with you.